short of the number needed for an effective majority. So the coalition would need to rely on the smaller parties to guarantee their legislation gets through.
There's no reason why Labour and the Liberal Democrats couldn't work, after all, with the parties of government in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. The prize is great. Progressive government in the UK, delivering, amongst other things, electoral reform and improved governance between the UK government and devolved administrations.
But Labour and the SNP are arch rivals in Scotland, and today the former Liberal Democrat leader Lord Ashdown said a red and yellow union could work without all the other party colours being poured in. But would this be the stable and strong government that all parties say they want to see? There is nothing certain, easy or risk-free about the deal being done in closed rooms around Westminster. Some senior Labour figures, such as John Reid, have warned that a Labour-Liberal Democrat coalition could destroy both parties. And a Liberal Democrat-Tory coalition is still possible, although many Conservatives are livid that the Liberal Democrats have been looking both ways. As David Cameron left home this morning, he stressed his offer to the Liberal Democrats was still on the table.
My own members of Parliament have shown that they're prepared to put aside party interest in the national interest by agreeing to a referendum on alternative vote. So it is now, I believe, decision time for the Liberal Democrats, and I hope they make the right decision that will give this country the strong, stable government that it badly needs, and it badly needs quickly.
The three party leaders arrived in the Commons this lunchtime, still haggling, still not knowing who the next Prime Minister will be. Ben Wright, BBC News, Westminster.
Our political correspondent Ian Watson is in Central Lobby in the Houses of Parliament when negotiations between the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats have been taking place. They finished a short time ago. We saw also Gordon Brown sweeping in there about half an hour ago. Do we know what progress, if any, has been made?
Not exactly. The Liberal Democrats certainly want to put a deal of some kind with either party on the table to all of their MPs and the party bigwigs, the federal executive, today. So they're having a joint meeting of the federal executive and their MPs at which they want a deal of some kind to be done. Now, immediately after the Lib Dem and Labour talks broke up, just in the last 15 minutes or so, I tried to have a quick word with Lord Mandelson, who invited me to clear off in no uncertain terms, while he and Ed Balls, another member of the negotiating team, went off to brief the Prime Minister. So certainly the mood music wasn't desperately positive, but I've since been told by a Downing Street source not to rule out a deal between Labour and the Liberal Democrats. What appears to be worrying the Liberal Democrats is twofold. Firstly, that they didn't think the tone of the talks with Labour was quite as constructive as with the Conservatives, but that doesn't stop them reaching a deal. And the second thing is whether Labour can deliver enough of their own backbenchers to seal any deal that they might negotiate.
That is an interesting point. What about Labour backbenchers? What is the feeling amongst them?
Well, this is something which is worrying certainly the Liberal Democrats, because we've heard from the party bigwigs, former cabinet ministers such as John Reid and David Blunkett, warning against any deal. They say it could damage the Labour Party long term. The party came second to try to stitch up a way of staying in power. But all the backbench Labour MPs don't have a formal meeting until tomorrow. So the Liberal Democrats would have to wait and hear what they said before they knew any deal was secure. And some of them might simply think that isn't worth their while. It also has to go through another hoop, the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party, which was meeting this afternoon with trade unionists on board. Now I'm picking up there is some scepticism towards doing a deal with the Liberal Democrats.
Ian Watson, thank you very much. Let's talk to our political correspondent Mike Sargent, who is outside Lib Dem headquarters. What about news from the Liberal Democrat side?
Yeah, Liberal Democrat sources in the last half an hour echoing what Ian Watson was saying there, that they're confident they're going to have a deal to put to the party later on today. That joint meeting of the federal executive and MPs, they need 3/4 of both bodies for any agreement to be waved through. So two numbers that could become very important a little bit later on today. If 9 or more members of the federal executive or 15 or more MPs say they don't like a deal, then things could get even more complicated.
And finally, Carol Walker, who is outside Conservative headquarters, joins me now. And what are the Tories saying?
Well, essentially, the Conservatives have been forced to play a waiting game today whilst those negotiations go on between Labour and the Liberal Democrats. I understand that the lines of communication have been opened. They're ready to have more negotiations this afternoon. But at the moment, there's nothing like that specifically planned. And in the meantime, David Cameron has had a real warning shot from some on the right of his own party with the Conservative Way Forward group, saying that they do not want a coalition with the Lib Dems. Now, of course, that still leaves open the idea of what's called a confidence and supply agreement, a deal whereby the Lib Dems would agree to support the Conservatives through a confidence motion and allow them to get through key legislation and a budget. But it is, I think, the first real sign that we've seen of the concern that has been bubbling away below the surface until now as to whether David Cameron is prepared to pay too high a price to try to get into number 10.
Well, thank you to all of our correspondents there. With me now are senior representatives of the three main parties: Michael Gove for the Conservatives, Simon Hughes for the Liberal Democrats, and the former Labour Party leader, Lord Kinnock. Good afternoon to all of you. Let me start with you, Lord Kinnock. What progress is being made in the talks, do you think?
I haven't got the faintest idea. I do know that everybody involved is motivated, as I'm sure they are when the conversations take place between the Liberals and Conservatives, by the desire to get stability that can be guaranteed over the next few years in order to foster the speediest possible recovery. And I'm certain that that is predominant in everybody's mind and their most convincing objective.
And can that be done with some sort of coalition between the Labour and the Liberal Democrats?
Oh yes, certainly. The involvement of other parties would have to be guaranteed, of course, and everybody would have to understand the terms. But in the late 1970s, whatever the other criticisms existed, we got stable government by getting a multi-party arrangement, not just between Labour and the Liberals, but between Labour, the Liberals and other parties too. And given the absolute vital necessity of stability for the fostering of economic recovery, I'm absolutely certain that such an arrangement could be achieved this time.
But as David Blunkett said this morning, I mean, you would end up with a coalition of the defeated. Is that really stability?
I understand the point that he's making. I think on reflection, David will understand that if the alternative courses were adopted, either, I think unmanageably, a Conservative minority government, or an agreement between the Conservatives and the Liberals, you would get sufficient Liberal members of Parliament who have deep objections to the Tories' approach to deficit reduction, certainly the speed and the scale of cuts that they'd want to make, and also Conservatives who have got a very long-held and deeply convinced opposition to any move away from the current system to electoral reform. So stability could not be guaranteed in those circumstances, and to that extent, all the alternatives offer their own difficulties and dangers, and the important thing is to see that in the interest of the country, those are managed by the offers that exist of arrangements between different parties.
Michael Gove, I mean, extraordinary times we're seeing at the moment. Do you feel in any way that this is slipping away from you? You've put your deal on the table.
I don't think it is. I think Lord Kinnock is right. I think all the parties are motivated by a desire to ensure that we can have a strong and stable government. And what was striking last night is that the entire Conservative Parliamentary Party met, and we put the national interest before our party interest. We thought that it was appropriate that we should make an open and generous offer to the Liberal Democrats, that we should consider changing the voting system and have a referendum and put that to the British people, so that we could have over the next 4 or 5 years a government with a secure majority in the House of Commons to take some of the difficult decisions that Lord Kinnock has quite rightly highlighted. I hope that offer will be accepted, but obviously it's for the Liberal Democrats to decide. It's a big decision, and I respect the autonomy of that party, and Simon and his colleagues now have an opportunity to reflect on what they think would be best.
Simon Hughes, I was listening to Sir Malcolm Rifkin this morning, who was calling the Liberal Democrats two-timers, the way that all this is being carried out, and the negotiations, the secret negotiations behind closed doors. Do you feel that you are becoming two-timers?
I think that's untypical of Malcolm Rifkin, who's a decent guy, but is probably troubled by the fact that there isn't the conventional single transfer of power from one party to another. And again, I have to say, I think we share a common view, the three of us. We understand the electorate gave no party a majority. We have to respect that and work with it. We understand that you don't get a secure agreement overnight. You have to negotiate it. And we also are clear that we have a responsibility to our members and to the public to talk both to the Conservative Party, which we did first because they had the largest number of seats and votes, but also to the Labour Party, who wanted to talk to us, with whom there is some more traditional affinity, and with whom we could come to an arrangement, as Neil Kinnock rightly said, as has been done in the past. This isn't a timeless process. It will be time limited. We understand the urgency, but you don't get secure and stable governments by trying to put everything together in 2 minutes. And we're clear that this week there has to be an agreement, and as Michael Gove rightly said, that there will have to be a decision.
But equally, the longer it gets drawn out, the more damaging it